Hello! High time for a phone show update, I think. Firstly and most importantly, I've had my hair cut. After a barrage of insults, I've bowed to the inevitable and hopefully you'll all shut up about it now. Secondly, I've started embedding the high bandwidth, high resolution version of the phone show in the main web page to improve your viewing experience, as they say. If you're on a slower broadband connection, you can click through the video to the YouTube page and watch the lower quality version there. Thirdly, if you're watching in iTunes on your desktop using the old quarter VGA feed and thinking how blocky and horrible the picture is, then you're watching the wrong feed. If you're viewing the phone show on a desktop, you really should be subscribed to the VGA high-res version, a URL listed here, but also linked from the main web page, of course. Finally, I'm widening the phones that this show is shot on to include the Nokia N97 and Samsung i7110. Let's see how they cope.
Catching up with the world, the last news section in Show 68 just missed Apple's release of iPhone firmware version 2.2. Nope, still not cut and paste, still no video capture, but Street View and Google Maps is really quite impressive, even if it's still very US centric. Plus there are a mountain of bug fixes and minor tweaks. I especially like the way you can get back to the first home screen with one key press. Now if there's only a quick way to get back to my ninth and final one. Nokia has announced one of its premier devices for 2009, the N97. You'll recognise the form factor from the much-liked HTC Titan II, aka the Kaiser, aka the Tilt. But this also merges in S60 5th edition and all the toys that Nokia can muster, including a high-res touchscreen, GPS and compass, Wi-Fi, high-spec camera, 32GB of built-in memory, plus a raft of software enhancements, including a live home screen that you can pack with online social widgets and feeds. Is the N97 going to be too big, too late, too expensive or too complicated? We'll find out. I'll have a prototype in for review in March. Nokia also announced Maps 3.0 and a unified messaging client, but I'll bring you more on those stories another time.
If you've been paying attention, you'll remember that I had the Samsung INNOV8 in for review over a month ago, but I haven't reviewed it yet on camera, and I can now introduce you to the candy bar version, the i7110 from Samsung still, but I still can't do a proper review of either device, and I'll explain why in a moment. First, let's go over the pros and cons of each. The INNOV8 first. It's a largish slider with 2.8-inch screen that suffers badly outdoors but is good indoors, 16GB of built-in flash memory plus a micro SD card slot. An 8-megapixel camera is superb in almost all light conditions, and the lens is well protected, but it's let down by video capture with a stupid software bug, meaning that audio and video are hopelessly out of sync. There's Wi-Fi, but it's hard to set up. After that it works well, while the GPS also works, again once it's been manually configured. Overall operation is fast and there are no performance issues. What about the i7110? Apart from the camera drop to 5 megapixels and the lack of the 16GB internal disk, it's essentially the same hardware as in the INNOV8 but in a candy bar form factor. The one crucial difference is that the screen's OLED, organic light-emitting diode, meaning that it's gloriously bright and visible even outdoors in most conditions, and it's more power efficient too. The camera works okay, but the lens isn't protected and will get scratched, and the video sync bugs also present here, sadly. Build quality is incredible. There are no squeaks, no weak points. This device is largely made of metal and will last for years, assuming that the OLED technology holds up. The only design disappointments here are that the custom key on the right is appallingly positioned and gets pressed every time I pick the phone up. And the app menu and cancel buttons are raised up above the function hang-up keys, meaning that they get hit by mistake quite often. The problem is that these devices aren't Nokia's. Now don't get me wrong, I'm happy for them not to be, but currently they're certificate locked out of most of Nokia's free add-on software and services, an integral part of S60 it seems. So no Nokia Maps, no sports tracker, no podcasting, no internet radio, no share online, and so on. All of which I could live with finding some kind of alternatives. Route 66 is built in, for example, plus there's RSS handling and web, there's Shozu for uploading, but there are wider compatibility issues too. S60 YouTube clients, MTube and MobiTube, didn't work properly on the two phones, while HandySafe, a staple of mine, wouldn't sync between the desktop and the phone because the affair wasn't using pucker Nokia PC Suite. Most games were fine though, proving that these two phones have plenty of graphical potential to be tapped. And then there's the question of support and updates. We're so used to Nokia providing semi-regular, do-it-at-home firmware updates. The complete absence of an equivalent utility or over-the-air update server here from Samsung comes as a huge shock. Now it's early days, as I say, for the i7110 and the INNOV8. Samsung and the developer community they want to engage know full well what they have to do in terms of catching up in all these areas I've mentioned. The reason I haven't gone for a full review for both these phones is that their usefulness will change dramatically when Samsung are fully up to speed. At the moment there are just too many frustrations, and they're nearly all down to software at the end of the day, which, as I keep emphasising on this show, is subject to regular firmware fixes, and in this case service enhancements as well. Still, hopefully I've given you a real feel for the strengths and weaknesses of the hardware in these two Samsung S60 flagships, INNOV8, i7110. Both of which will come into their own in 2009 with a bit of luck. Following on from two Samsungs with great build quality but immature software comes a Sony Ericsson with very similar problems. Maybe it's my fault for getting these units so promptly. I'll try and be really late in the future. Firing up a Sony Ericsson phone and seeing the Windows Mobile logo appear is very strange at first, but you do get quickly used to both the OS and, to be honest, to Sony Ericsson's vision for the X1. You see, under the hood, the X1 is yet another QWERTY keyboarded, side-sliding Windows Mobile 6.1 professional smartphone. But it does have two unique selling points that help it stand out from the crowd. Number one has to be its innovative panels system. With Windows Mobile looking so fiddly and stylus-centric in these iPhone days, every Windows Mobile licensee is going for an extra, prettier and more accessible front end. HTC have TouchFlow 3D, which tries to do a lot and falls down rather miserably because you constantly drop back to raw Windows Mobile so often, ruining the illusion. Sony Ericsson don't try to hide the Windows Mobile too much, but they've thought about what people want and have implemented panels, which you can think of as alternative home screens. After all, customizing the home stroke today screen is the number one thing Windows Mobile users seem to want to fiddle with. So, for example, there's a clock-based panel, a calendar-based panel, a Google search panel, and so on. Each is customizable and with some overlap, i.e. shortcuts to recently used apps, date and time, calendar entries, and so on. I was expecting to hate panels, but after using the system for a bit, I can see exactly what Sony Ericsson were trying to do, and I rather like the idea. Extra panels, e.g. this Facebook one, can be downloaded from the X1 support site. They install just like a regular Windows Mobile application and can be added from the panel settings screen. In this case, showing you your Facebook friends and what they're up to. The drawback at the moment at least is that the panels can be slow to load up to varying degrees. Some are fast, such as the Google search panel, loading in about 2 seconds, but let's say you want to change from the clock panel to the calendar one. You press the front face panels button, wait a second, the display of 9 panel icons appears in about a second or so, press the calendar panel and something appropriate appears immediately. But it's not your real calendar, it's a pre-prepared static image. A full 4 seconds goes by before your actual calendar and appointments appear. Even worse, and the Facebook panel is a prime example of this, the panels don't seem to be cached in any meaningful multitasking way. So you tap on the Facebook panel icon and it takes a full 20 seconds to load and log you in again, even though I might have been using it just a minute ago, fully logged in, and with no breaks in connectivity. 20 seconds is a long time. So consider panels very much of version 1 and to be used very sparingly. I found myself sticking to this, the fast loading default Windows Mobile Today screen, which rather defeats the point of the whole system. Anyway, the second unique point about the X1 is that it's superbly built, a real cut above the average plastic design to come out of HTC. Yes, they built the X1 too, but under strict guidelines from Sony Ericsson, and it shows. The casing has more brushed metal than plastic, the arc slide mechanism is superb, the keyboard's pretty good considering its diminutive size, although there is one big design flaw. The QWERTY key legends are dark but backlit, meaning that in bright or dark conditions you're fine, but in average lighting the light from underneath cancels out the ambient light and the key legends become very hard to read. Very annoying. The X1 sits on the desk beautifully on a rubber camera surround and a raised rubber ridge on the X1's bottom. The screen's high resolution at 800 by 480 and gorgeous indoors, though it blacks out rather badly, as recent HTC handhelds have done when outdoors in sunlight. The arc slider mechanism gives it a slight angle when extended. Sony Ericsson do seem to have made sure of generally good performance, panels aside though, by putting in 256 megabytes of RAM and a huge 1500 mAh battery. The integration of D-pad, optical joystick, QWERTY keyboard and touchscreen is first class here, though you will need to keep the stylus out for most activities. This still isn't a finger-friendly operating system, of course. The on-screen QWERTY keyboard in particular seems microscopic after the iPhones. The inclusion of 2 web browsers is again very confusing, especially when Opera is much better, and yet is the one demoted to the Start Programs menu. Inexplicable. You know what to expect for the rest of the software suite though. It's Windows Mobile, 6.1 Professional, Office Mobile, Google Maps, etc. Very powerful, but fiddly and rarely intuitive. Equipped with a 3.2 megapixel stills camera, the X1 takes decent enough photos in good light, shown here. Although focusing time in bad light is as high as 6 seconds. Not that it would be worth snapping under those conditions anyway. One novelty is that you can touch a spot on the display that you want the focusing to centre on, but it's annoying that this doesn't reset after each shot.
And this is focused video recording on the X1 in weak but rather dazzling winter sunlight. VGA capture, pretty good quality, the sound's not too hot though, but good to see focusing.
Despite the long gestation period of the X1, its software still seems unfinished. The panels interface still needs lots of optimization, and I experienced a number of OS freeze-ups requiring removing the battery cover to reset the device. As with the Samsungs from earlier in the show, this is a device that will be a real contender once it's finished. The Sony Ericsson Xperia X1.